Welcome, listeners, to episode 11 of the Simply Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Josh K, and I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. First, if you liked the episode, please do drop a like, comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I'd obviously like to start off the episode by thanking our sponsor, IPS Insurance. Insurance so good, you'd hope something bad happens to you. And I'd like to thank you guys for supporting the show in any way that you can. This week, I've invited two very accomplished female athletes on the show. Nikki, Todd, and Sam Cornett have taken the time to join me this week, and we're gonna have lots of fun. I've brought them on because they really have that female perspective. They've experienced it between men and women. They've been there in lots of cool events, Pan Am Games, Commonwealth, World teams for squash. So it's going to be really fun. I think I'd like to talk with them between opportunities squash has given them, and that imbalance possibly between men and women when it comes to media and money and possibly fame, having that platform. I'm going to have lots of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode as much as I do. But before we get to anything else, let's quickly recap what's happening in sports. We're coming up. NBA is probably exactly 2 weeks away. Preseason starts in just a week. But man, it's getting hype. Fantasy is already starting. I know I've got my big northern secondary school draft in a couple days, so I'm getting prepared for that. All the mock drafts I can do, getting prepared with all the different scenarios I can get, writing down all the notes. But if you guys have any questions about any opinions I got on the NBA season, please comment them down below. I'm going to try to give you guys some answers. Maybe in a couple weeks I'm going to do a Q&A episode. You guys can ask me whatever you want. And then finally, the big awaited Mike Tyson debut from the last 15 years out of the ring. Him and Roy Jones Jr. fought, and it ended in a draw. Of course it did. They seemed very okay with it. But the big talk of that night was actually the undercard. Jake Paul and Nate Robinson, ex-NBA star Nate Robinson. Jake Paul knocked him out cold in the third round, I believe, second or third round. It was crazy. The NBA players were not loving it. Didn't think Nate Robinson was, showing the true love, the true strength of the NBA. But Jake Paul's calling out the big guns now. He's already called out Conor McGregor and thinks that he can beat him. So we'll see about that. I don't think he will. I think Conor McGregor would destroy him. But that's it for the recap. Not much going on. I'm sure we're going to be talking a lot about NBA in the coming weeks. But we might as well get our guests in here, Sam and Nikki. I would like to welcome two very talented athletes, two very talented women that I know in sports, Sam Cornett and Nikki Todd. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, Josh, for having us.
No problem. This is going to be fun. I've been telling some people that we've done like 10 episodes, big milestone already. But we're missing that female perspective. I haven't really heard any opinions from your guys, so I'm really interested to see what we can talk about today. But before we start, I thought we'd give the fans a little bit of background between the two of you. Both are very accomplished in the sport of squash. I've played with both of you, and if you can see, Sam is repping our team right back here, the B&R Beavers. Yeah, sorry, Nikki didn't make the cut this year, but maybe we'll get her in future. Maybe we'll yeah.
Let's go, Lizards!
Get that hat off. Anyways. First we'll start with Sam. I know that, can we call it, semi-retired from squash? Is that correct?
Always play. I'll always play.
Yes, you'll always play. It'll never leave. But now you're in school now. You stopped squash just for a bit, and you're going to school, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure squash will always be that hobby, of course, and of course you still play for the Beavers, so that'll always be something. But Nikki, you're obviously still a pro going, singles mainly, but the recent discovery. We'll talk about your doubles career. That's really going forward.
Yeah, at least one of my rankings is going in the right direction. Um, I guess, I don't know. I started playing doubles when I moved to Toronto, kind of just for fun.
Hmm.
And then I I think it's because I like a little more chaos. I like playing more cross courts, not so much straight.
Hmm.
So I really took to doubles, and I also like to run a lot. Uh, so yeah, it's gone well for me so far.
Yeah, number one in the world, I might add, and she's going for the record right now. Without We won't talk about the fact that maybe it was because of COVID, but you're almost at a year now, number one in the world. So we'll keep that
That's
going
nothing.
strong.
There's no tournaments.
And we almost won the Ontario's this year. We came just short, but we're looking to next year. That's the goal. We're looking to next year.
Yeah.
So let's get this going. We might as well. Sports obviously have been the biggest thing in our lives. Like you guys a little more than me, but I can include myself in it for some aspect. But squash mainly has opened up so many cool opportunities for you guys. And I thought we just share it with the fans here. Just talk about some of the opportunities that squash has opened up for you. Sam, if you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, sure. I could go on and on. That's a nice question. Story time.
Yeah.
I think one of the coolest things about squash is that it's involved in so many different multi-sport events, and they're great goals for us to strive for, so that we get to not only compete, but we get to watch athletes from all these different sports compete, travel to a new place,
Hmm.
be in like an athlete village sort of situation. And I think that that's one of my favorite um, aspects of being a pro and being on the national team. Like Nikki and I went to multiple events together, and Commonwealth Games was really cool. Pan Am
Hmm.
Games was really cool. So I think that's one of my favorite things about like what we've got to experience.
Yeah, and people obviously don't realize because squash has yet we've lost some pretty bad arguments. We have yet to get into the Olympics and yeah, I guess some of those bigger events getting known worldwide. But at the same time, behind the scenes, you get to go to some really cool places. I know Nikki, even recently, you went to India and South Africa, and like you go down to Bermuda or something like that, right? To play or go play a tournament or go to some event, which is super cool. And I obviously haven't experienced that just yet. But yeah, Nikki, if you want to continue here, I know you've gone to some pretty cool places.
Yeah, I think that's a big perk for sure. Just being able to see the world doing what you love is so cool.
Hmm.
It also got me on this Simply Sports podcast, which is amazing. It's set
No,
me
no,
up
no.
for fame,
That
I'm sure.
has nothing to do with it. We just love you as a person. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Yeah, I think you places that you would never go or think to go, squash has allowed me to go. For example, none of it. I would
Hmm.
have never probably traveled there,
Hmm.
or had a reason to go there, but a squash exhibition opened that up for me, and it's such a cool place. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know Sam, you just mentioned it a little that you guys have also gone to like Pan Am's. You guys were both on national teams, and those were you guys either of you on the world's team? Were both of you?
Yeah, a
Yeah.
few
Yeah.
times together.
Hmm. Yeah. So stuff like that, I even hear it nowadays with kids in juniors now or just leaving juniors that are on the world's teams. Oh my God, the places you get to go are insane. I feel so special even, if you travel with Squash Ontario to go to the U.S. Open, you get to go to Harvard or some cool university down in the U.S. But then world's teams, you're going to like Egypt or something insane like that. So, if there's one specific that you'd like to talk about, but just that aspect of like Commonwealth or Pan Am's, if either of you want to talk about that at all, uh, I just find that super cool.
Yeah, I think just to kind of elaborate on what you're saying, I had the exact same experience as you when I was younger than you are now, but just the fact that with squash, I was already traveling to like cool universities, going to the States when I was, I don't know, 14 or 15, going to South America for junior Pan Ams.
Hmm.
Squash has these opportunities that other sports that I was participating in didn't, like hockey. I had to be really good if I wanted to be, traveling anywhere outside of Canada, right?
Hmm.
Squash, I worked really hard, but it had all these opportunities to travel before, maybe because it's an individual sport as well, but
Hmm.
I could travel to all these cool places so early on in my career, and it just gave me that bug of wanting to pursue it and wanting to be better and wanting to continue and see more. So I'm totally with you on that. Just like
Hmm.
right from when you're 11 or 12, if you get the chance to go to the U.S. Open, it just ignites something in you that it makes you want more.
Yeah, totally. And once again, you just mentioned that individual aspect. That's the biggest thing about squash is it's individual all of your junior career, but then you get to experience some of that as kind of a team, whether you're still playing individually, but you're traveling somewhere either representing Ontario, representing Canada, like you guys have. Doing it with your friends, like that's just I'm sure you guys went to Worlds together, all like best friends. It would have been like one of the best times of your life. Like it was something that you'll always remember, right?
Yeah,
For sure.
yeah,
It's like you get to spend every minute together as well. Like you do everything. You train together, you eat together, you room together.
Yeah,
Um, it's a lot, but it is actually really fun. And
yeah.
you slowly even closer than you already might have been.
Hmm.
So yeah. And I think one cool thing about squash as well is you get to choose if you want to travel. It's not based on if you're good enough to be on a team. Like, even if you're not good enough to make the national team, for me coming from Saskatchewan, I could still go play US Open, British Open, all that stuff. Even though I wasn't the best in Canada at the time, I could still do that because I wanted to. It didn't
Hmm.
matter that I wasn't in the top or made a certain team. You can still go play these events and kind of see other countries play and all that stuff.
Yeah,
You have the choice.
yeah, 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 totally. And that's what keeps so many kids motivated in a way where they know that you can literally just make a trip out of it, go down to Harvard and see all these insane players play. Even if you're there not to win it, obviously, like you have to be that crazy level to win it. But even just to go down there and experience it, so many kids take that perspective, like you just said.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like in the middle where I don't really think I'm in that position to win it, but at the same time, like I'm there. Like you go to compete and you want that source, but it's always the best time. But what we can transition here is we've all mentioned like you're both touring pros. You've gone to Pan Am's, Commonwealth, Worlds for squash, and some of that times you've been with men's teams and women's teams, and in squash specifically, there seems to be from my perspective a little bit or maybe a lot I don't know much about it of an imbalance between men and women when it comes to like media and maybe money earnings and the amount of fame you can get by from promotion. But I think you guys have that better perspective that I'd like to talk about is what is your argument there between men and women in squash? Like, is it harder for women to succeed? Maybe is it harder for women to get that platform? Do women actually make less money? I don't know. But Nikki, if you'd like to start us off there, just please. I have no clue, so please let me know.
Um, well, recently, I don't know exactly when it was, but squash has made like our world championships equal prize money.
Hmm.
Sam, do you know the first year that it was equal? Do you know what year it was?
I wonder if it was Chicago.
Chicago,
I
yeah,
think.
that's what I.
Hmm.
So, yeah, which was just 3 years ago, maybe. So recently, squash is making steps to make it more equal, which is amazing.
Hmm.
But if you look at the men's calendar and the women's calendar, they have, in any given month, they have 10 to 15 tournaments to choose from, and we have three or four.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's not that it's harder for us to succeed, I don't think. Like we put in the same work, we try just as hard as
Hmm.
they do.
Hmm.
We do all the right things, but we just don't have as many opportunities to get those ranking points or make as much money.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And based on that, do you think that like what I've never understood what do you think the reasoning for that is? Because obviously they're able to choose, right? They make the calendars, they choose where the tournaments are. Is it do they think that men attract more, so that's where they give more tournaments, or do the men make more money for the companies?
Well, it's actually like clubs that choose.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if your club wanted to run a professional event, you guys can choose if you want to make it men or women. So it's not PSA that actually makes those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
It's clubs that choose. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So it's not PSA choosing to like make this a men's tournament because it's going to be more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
It's the squash club that runs it.
Yeah, like you mentioned that recently they've changed the money. Um, was there a lot of drama between like the men from the women's side? Was there a lot of arguing about not getting equal pay?
Sam would know more about that one than I would because she was sort of at the top. That I wasn't playing world events yet. I
Mm-hmm.
want to give you some information there.
Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
Sure. I think first of all, I'll talk about that like particular situation. Once PSA started to push women's events, there were some changes in the structure of PSA. There was definitely a lot of differing opinion out there, and I know a concern of the men was that um, as PSA starts to push women more, are they going to get left behind? Like, they have a certain standard right now, and everyone's always looking for growth, right? So
Mm-hmm.
are the men going to stagnate while the women are pushed for, equal prize money for more events?
Mm-hmm.
Um, which is a valid concern. I mean, it didn't concern me that much because I thought it looked like they were doing great and there were lots of events. It looked like a healthy tour, in my opinion.
Yep.
But I don't know the ins and outs of the men's tour. So I really appreciated PSA's push. I know a lot of companies were looking for equality around that time too. That was starting to kind of come up in the business finance world, companies that were sponsoring events. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that all came together at the same time, and I really do think things are pretty healthy right now. I think what it comes down to right now, as Nikki said, the calendars look very different, and I actually think this is more of a systemic sort of social issue, if I may call it an issue,
Mm-hmm.
um, in that there's less women who are involved at the grassroots level,
Mm-hmm.
and as girls age through being teenagers, through their early adulthood, they're going to drop off from playing competitive sports. And I don't know all the exact numbers, but I'm involved in an organization that knows like all the numbers. It's called Fast and Female, and it's astonishing the number of girls that drop out of competitive sports. So
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is more like programming for very young girls and teenagers and young adults. And also having more role models like myself and Nikki, if I may be so bold, if there's more of us and there's more professional women players, then that will push a bigger grassroots entry into sports and make girls stay in sport,
Mm-hmm.
which will then increase the number of tournaments because there's more people playing. There's more demand. There's more like higher quality. There'll be more girls for PSA tournaments throughout Canada. For example, right now I think there's like maybe 3 PSAs for women and maybe like 10 or more for the men. But a lot of our players can't play all those events because there's only 4 or 5 of us playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we can't participate in all of them because some people are doing really well, so they have to fly to Hong Kong instead of playing the tournament in Calgary, let's say.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's a very complicated issue, hence why it's not easily solved.
Very
But I do think
complicated.
it's very much a social grassroots sort of issue and programming through teen and early adulthood.
Yeah, totally. And you just said though, right, is getting those role models, and you can speak for all, right? I think squash definitely is a sport where people are going professional not 100% like basketball or tennis, for that money, right? Like there's not too much money going on in squash unless you're like best of the best, I guess. There's that sense of just like that's what you love to do. That's it's just love the sport, and that is what keeps you going. And if you want more women or teenagers or men as well to keep playing the sport, then you just need to get them involved and making sure that they love squash, right? Because, like you said, if you see more numbers about them, more and more teenagers kind of like dropping squash or not going pro, it's because that they know unless they love doing it, then maybe they're not gonna get their financial needs from playing, right? Because you really gotta love it and you really gotta train and whatever, right? So yeah, you're super right when you talk about that social issue. I think it's definitely a problem that happens in all sports, and squash I don't know as much about because it doesn't have that platform. It doesn't have all the stuff on the media talking about the inequality in money between men and women in squash, right? So I think that's all of our ultimate goals is to try and get squash out there for that platform. But that's great. I love hearing that. That's super interesting. But kind of got an ending question here to make it a little more fun. Is I want to ask, you guys have had long careers with lots of events, lots of ups and downs. I know I've had ups and downs, and I've probably had half the career you guys have. And I wanted to ask possibly one or the biggest kind of regret or something you change from your squash careers if you could choose just one thing. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. So whoever wants to start, go ahead.
I think I would have moved to Toronto earlier and started competing professionally earlier than I did. I took
Mm-hmm.
a few years off after high school. I also started squash late, like I started at 14. I wish I started earlier. My dad tried and I really didn't like it, and I came back at 14. So I think just in general, starting earlier, playing more,
Mm-hmm.
and then moving to Toronto right away just to get more competition, more coaching, more training. People who really understood the high level part of squash. You just didn't really get that in Saskatchewan. So I think that would be my biggest thing that I would change is just doing all that earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a cool perspective because yeah, you're obviously somewhere where in Saskatchewan, the tournaments there's relatively like little opportunities to train as much as there is in Toronto. Like Toronto's like one of the biggest in Canada for sure for squash and juniors, other than
Yeah.
probably out west. But yeah, that's really cool. If I can just before Sam you share yours, just jump in for what I would think when it comes to this situation, just to give like some context, is only because I haven't had that long of a junior career. It's probably since I was like 8 or 9 years old. But I think for me, one of actually the biggest regrets, it's super weird. I probably might sound a little like a spoiled brat here, but it's almost that I didn't peak too early in a way. I might not make sense there because, at probably my best years of juniors was when I was, like 9 and 10 years old. I was doing well, and that's when height and strength didn't matter as much. So my skill seemed to be better than at most kids. But then once that height and everything got, it turns out that I was not motivated. I was, not playing squash as much as the other guys because I didn't really need to, right? I was just saying, oh, I can play less and focus on other things. As long as I'm still doing, well in tournaments, right? And then eventually these guys start catching up, and then they beat me, and then I was dropped for a long time for sure, like way behind, because they had been consistent, 6 days a week, hard training to be those number ones for so long, and I was kind of just in there not training as much, and before you know it I was way behind. So I think the biggest regret for me was only that not that I was worse than them, but definitely like at their level. So just I had that kind of motivation to keep growing, like the motivation to go out there 6 times a week, because if I didn't, then that everyone else was going to beat me. So I thought I'd just share that real quick there. But Sam, if you go ahead and I'd like to hear yours.
Yeah, actually, on that note, I think that's a really interesting thing about sports is that you you can it rarely have both, you know, the
Mm-hmm.
extreme motivation and the talent. And I think
Mm-hmm.
you just described yourself as a very good example of that. And you've got I think, a couple of tryhards with Nikki and I here. And I mean, what is that mindset where, you know, the number ones in the world right now, Nikki, you can maybe talk to this, number one in the world.
Yeah, right. We got one right here.
Yeah, it's so hard to be the best. I think it must be so hard. I have no idea, but to be the best and to still have that extreme motivation that you're talking about. I know so many people who are so talented, but they don't they don't really want to do the work. It's hard, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know so many people that put in like jillions of hours that don't get the results.
Yeah.
So it's a rare beast that comes through that has both, you know, and that's why, you know, watching sports is so cool, seeing those people and learning about what they've done to make that happen.
Yeah, you're right. There's so many factors for sure. Yeah, I'm sure all of us have seen those one or two, just like unreal people at the top of that list. And you do have to admit we're all different. Some of us are kind of willing to make those slight sacrifices if it means that in their squash career or whatever they're gonna be at the top longer, but they're gonna have to sacrifice some things in their social life, maybe academics. I don't know what it is, but it definitely takes and I've talked about this with multiple guests actually on the show. Like it takes a very specific person and a specific mindset to accomplish what you're saying, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
So Sam,
what's your biggest regret?
Yeah, let's hear your biggest regret here. I'm interested.
She's avoiding it.
She doesn't want to admit it.
So since we have Nikki here, I think one of my this isn't a regret because I can't change it, but or I couldn't do anything more at the time. But I really wish we beat India at the Commonwealth Games. Really bad. Was it India or was that at the in the doubles match at Commonwealth? We were in the quarters, I think, and I wish that we won that match.
Yeah.
Oh, it devastates Nikki too.
It does. It really does.
We're so close.
Yeah, that's something.
We were up pretty big too.
We were up so big.
We were up like 9-4 or something crazy.
And were those
in the third?
Was that the at Commonwealth? Is it doubles on the doubles court, or what is that when you play doubles but it's on that shorter but wider court? What is that called?
That's what it was. Softball doubles.
It was that. And what's that called?
Softball doubles.
Softball
So it's like a
doubles.
singles court length, but 6 feet wider, and a 13-inch tin, which is incredible.
Wow. So and those games are up to 11 though, not 15.
That's right.
So
Yes.
that's why I guess
And it's
9-4 would hurt a little more knowing that you
So
were
much.
close.
that would've
Those
put
are
us
so
on the
tough
ground.
though, because you can't change it. That's the hard part. You know that you're gonna kind of in a harsh way gonna have to accept it in a way, but no one ever does.
Yeah.
Even me, I have a couple of those. Some up 2-1, 10-2. Maybe someone watching this know who it was against. Up 10-2, 2-1 in the finals of a tournament, and I lost. So those ones hurt. Those ones hurt. There's some tough ones. 8 straight match balls to lose in a fifth at 12 years old. Yeah, you're not coming back. You're not coming back that easy from those ones.
Oh.
So
Before you go, I have one other regret that's not a match that I think maybe could also be helpful for you or other people.
yeah, totally.
I
Go ahead.
regret not doing the math earlier in my pro career, and it might apply to juniors as well. I don't know how your point system works, but do the math. figure out what is the best approach in terms of tournaments. You should play because you love it, but if you're going to be a professional, you should also be a professional and understand the point system and choose wisely based on that, and choose how many events. Because divisors are, kind of complicated, but very important. Mm-hmm. And I learned that the hard way when I stopped playing tournaments and my ranking went up. So do your math.
Sorry, that's actually really interesting. But you think, does that relate to, like you said, does that relate to rankings? Is that mainly what you're talking about? Kind of just understanding what happens with, the amount of tournaments you play, amount of tournaments you win, where you win, versus the point system? Is that what you're more talking about?
Yeah, so I'm not trying to say play the system, but it is part of your job, I think, and I didn't really embrace that. I played so many tournaments because I love playing, I love competing, I wanted to see how I was doing against everyone, I wanted to, get results, and I played so many tournaments that my actual results were diluted. So, the good results I had were, didn't matter as much against the bad ones. So I had to play less so that when I, the good results that I had mattered a lot. Does that make sense?
For sure. And you just said it. You don't want to feel like you're cheating the system, but at the same time, if you really look at it, it is kind of part of it. It's part of what you got to do. Everyone does it. And no one really looks at it as cheating or doing a bad thing. It's part of the entire thing, right? So whatever. But that's awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show, guys. That's gonna do it for us. I hope to see you soon. Sam, keep repping the Beavers. Nikki, I'm sorry, maybe we'll get you next year. But yeah, maybe not. I think we got to keep Sam in the spotlight. That's all I'm saying.
I'll always be a lizard, Josh.
Lizard for life. No, that's not what I wanted to hear. It's all good. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show, guys. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Thanks, Josh.
Hopefully we'll play squash together soon.
Yes, definitely. Hopefully we can. Okay, bye, guys.
Bye.
Well, listeners, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. Please like, subscribe, comment any suggestions you have on the show, what you liked, what you didn't like, and please, if you don't mind, share with as many friends as you can. Anyone who hasn't seen the show, I'm sure hopefully they'll like it. You have no idea what sharing can do. It does a lot for the show, really gets the name out there, so I love to do that. I'd like to thank my sponsor, IPS Insurance. Without them, none of this would be possible. And of course, I'd like to thank my guests for coming on. It was a great conversation. It was cool for me because it kind of reunited this cool little group we had back when I was probably, 9 or 10 years old. This little kid commentating for some squash tournaments. It was cool. The whole gang was back. But if you can't watch it on YouTube, no problem. You can always watch it at Simply Sports on Spotify. But if I can suggest, YouTube might be a little better if you have the opportunity, just because it gives that visual aspect. You got the room, you got everything. Why wouldn't you? But anyways, that's gonna do it for me, guys. I'm gonna be signing off. Host Josh K. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're gonna see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.